So today we're talking Wyoming whiskey, limited editions. Let's do this. Like I mentioned earlier, we're talking Wyoming whiskey, specifically their limited editions. So the ones we're going to be focusing on today are going to be their double cask and their easy rider. So these are two that were introduced to me, obviously samples that were provided again by Wyoming whiskey. So thank you very much for providing the samples for me to do a review of. But I wanted to do these as I sat down with them, got into them a little bit more. I really felt like this was something that you guys need to hear a little bit more about. So like I said before, we'll kind of get into, again, the double cask and their easy rider, give you a little more information as to what some of these are. Are they worthy of your money? So why don't we go ahead and dive into the review today. First, we're going to start up with their double cask. So what exactly is the double cask? So the double cask is going to be their PX sherry finished bourbon whiskey. This guy's coming in at 100 proof. Mash bill on this one is 68% corn, 20% wheat, and 12% malted barley. It is non-age stated, but there are some, as I kind of did a little bit of digging on age, it looks like this one's approximately in that 5-year-ish range, which then they take and double cask it into a former PX sherry barrel. MSRP is coming in at right around $60 for this guy. So why don't we go ahead and we'll kind of dive into the first one. Again, this is the Wyoming whiskey double cask. All right, let's go ahead and dive into the nose. So for me, immediately, I'm getting this nice cocoa powder kind of nose. Great cinnamon, baking spices. Lots of, again, cinnamon, nutmeg, things along those lines. Light dark fruit. This is probably the influence of the PX sherry that's coming through. Nice medium oak on that. A little hint of like a black pepper as well. So it smells like it wants to be creamy. Really nice rich caramel note on that. I'll even say a little hint of like a leather or something like that. All right, more importantly, let's dive into the palate. Cheers. So immediately, my first thought is it has a very creamy mouthfeel on it. Really nice baking spice as well. Some really nice dark fruits on this as well. Not overpowering by any means from the PX sherry, but there is that nice subtle like dark fruit that's there. I'll also say a really nice, again, like I mentioned before, baking spice, but it's very present on this one as well. Some really nice kind of pastry notes as well. It's a little bit of like a pie crust or something that's very like rich, slightly decadent. So you get something similar to like a flaky pie crust where you've got that richness, some depth that's there to it. Really nice sweet oak that's there as well. I would say it's balanced extremely well. I think the oak is always there, but you're not having to necessarily focus on it. It's present. A lot of the baking spices kind of taking over on it. Again, slight leather note that's there as well. Those jammy, kind of light jammy fruit notes as well. But one thing that stayed consistent with this kind of all the way through have been those really nice baking spices that are there. So the baking spice and kind of that light dark fruit, really nice kind of balance to it so far. I'll even say there's a hint or a touch of like an orange, maybe like a lemon zest that's there, but there is this kind of zestiness that's there to it, while also remaining like very creamy. But again, like I mentioned before, consistently all the way through, those baking spices, again, that little bit of like a cocoa powder note on it, those jammy, kind of light jammy fruit notes. Again, that little bit of a cocoa powder that's there as well. It's probably drinking for me right on the proof point. So again, I mentioned this is coming in at 100 proof. For me, it's drinking exactly like that. So I think this becomes a very, very approachable whiskey for someone who is, I'll even go beyond just getting into whiskey, but if you want something that has those nice, subtle fruit notes, slight pastry notes, a little bit of cocoa powder, hint or a touch of that orange zest or lemon zest that's there. Really nice kind of sweet oak that's there. It's very well balanced, and honestly, I'm surprised at it overall. I wasn't sure. I don't have a lot of experience with Wyoming whiskey, but so far I'm pleasantly surprised by this whiskey. Really, really fantastic whiskey there. So, but guys, before we move on, I've got to pay some bills around here. So let's hear from today's sponsor, ZBiotics. So I'm sure you've heard and seen all the buzz around this brand, ZBiotics. The question is, what is it and what is it going to do for you? Today we're going to take a look at that right now. So ZBiotics is the first of its kind. This is a probiotic drink that breaks down the byproduct of alcohol that just gives you that after morning sluggish feeling after maybe enjoying a few too many cocktails. So how does it work? Simply prior to enjoying your favorite alcoholic beverage or heading out on the town for the evening, simply open up one of the bottles within the box and enjoy it. That's it. You're on your way to then feeling much better, much more productive the following morning without having that after morning sluggish feeling. For me, I like to use these right before doing a barrel pick. When you're going through rick houses and you're enjoying or consuming samples, this will assure that the morning after, you don't have that after morning sluggish feel. So I have to say a big thank you to ZBiotics for sponsoring today's video. Make sure you check out the link in the description below. Use code MyBourbonJourney. Enjoy 15% off your order. Again, use code MyBourbonJourney. And a big thank you goes out to ZBiotics again for sponsoring today's video. So let's go ahead and move on to the Outrider. So this is something that's very different and unique. So in order to make sure I got this right, so this is going to be a blend of two different mash bills. So the first one's going to come in at 48% rye, 40% corn, and 12% malted barley. The second blend on this is going to come in at 68% corn, 20% rye, 12% malted barley. So we've got one that is an almost rye mixed or blended with an actual bourbon. So something very different and unique. And the one thing I'll say about this was, this is their first introduction to rye or using this kind of blend, in a whiskey of theirs. So this will be kind of interesting to see how this one kind of shakes out. So before we dive into this, here's a little more information on the Outrider. So again, this is coming in at 100 proof. I had just mentioned the mash bill or the blend of two different mash bills on this. It is non-age stated, and the MSRP on this is going to come in at right around that $75 price point. So let's go ahead and take a look at the color on this, and we'll kind of dive into today's review. So you can see this is slightly darker in color, I'll say, than the bourbon that was PX sherry finished. But again, maybe like a little bit of a darker honey light type of copper. So, all right, let's go ahead and dive into the nose. Boy, so my first impression right out of the gate is this beautiful like orange zest that's there. Really nice kind of sweet, rich oak. And it's fairly sweet. There is that kind of rye note there, but it's definitely on the sweet side. Also like a nice buttercream. It's almost a combo of the orange and that kind of buttercream. It's, a bit of like an orange, like dreamsicle type of nose. Again, beautiful baking spice on this. And I think as you kind of get into the nose a little bit more of those baking spices start to come out. For me, again, it's heavy on the nutmeg side of things. Again, that cinnamon is definitely there. Or if I kind of use a generic, if I use the generic reference of just a baking spice, again, all of those are definitely there. But I am picking up more of like a nutmeg kind of nose. Yeah, I love that combo of the orange and vanilla, that sweet oak that's there. Again, yeah, like I mentioned before, it's really along the lines of like an orange sickle, something along those lines. And here's where I'll say the rye is now kind of starting to, I don't want to say take over, but the influence of the rye is there. And I'll say specifically a heavier rye, only from the standpoint of it being a little bit more of like on the rye bread side of things. So I think even as someone who may not enjoy rye, there's definitely the sweetness backbone of this one that would, I think, make this very enjoyable for you. Boy, and here's something that's going to be very interesting for me on a rye. And that's going to be the combo of like a vanilla custard and almost like a banana custard. So I'll say vanilla banana custard, but there's something, and banana is not something that I tend to pick up quite often, but there is that slight banana, or I'll even go as far as saying tropical note. There's something that's very tropical, maybe like a juicy fruit bubble gum, something along those lines. But more importantly, let's see how this one's going to taste. Cheers. So again, right out of the gate, fairly viscous, fairly creamy mouth coating. Immediately that baking spice is wanting to kick in with the combination of that sweet, rich oak, but definitely that orange and vanilla creamsicle note. I was getting that quite a bit on the nose. That is carried over right to the palate. Again, that great baking spice or great spice overall. Very velvety mouthfeel to it. For me, that's one thing that's very important with a whiskey is to have a nice mouthfeel. You don't want your whiskey, even as good as it may be, you know, taste-wise, you want there to be some like creaminess, some kind of backbone that's there to it to make it more enjoyable. Yeah, and again, a little bit of that milk chocolate or kind of cocoa powder influence. So that's one thing I've picked up on both is a transfer of like this chocolate, more of like a cocoa powder kind of note to it. And again, there's that vanilla custard, banana custard kind of note that I was getting on the nose. Not something, again, that I get very often, but it is definitely present. And I'm not sure what it is that's giving this a little bit of that banana, you know, vanilla custard, more tropical, like juicy fruit bubble gum. There's something that is very, I'll say, tropical overall about it, with the combination of more standard kind of rye notes. It's just something that is slightly different and unique. And I have to say, I'm pleasantly surprised by both of these. I think for what they are, and I don't know the overall availability of these in terms of what their production and what the allocation is, but my recommendation would be just based off of what I'm trying today. I think both of them offer a unique experience and something maybe not totally different. I would say the Outrider is slightly more unique than the PX Sherry Finished Bourbon, but for both of them, I think they offer up something, again, slightly different, but something that for a whiskey drinker that is looking for something that's maybe different than what they're used to trying, I would say give both of these a try. I think they're both worthy of your money from that standpoint. So again, going back to both of these, pleasantly surprised and a bit kind of taken back because they're as good, if not better than what I was expecting and or hoping for. There you go, guys. So we started out with the double cask PX Sherry Finish Bourbon, and then we went over to the Outrider, which was a blend of two mash bills, one an almost rye, and then second a bourbon that they're producing as well. So really, really fun review to do for you guys today. If you have tried either and or both, leave a comment below. I'd love to know your thoughts on, you know, either or both of these. That's always something that I'm interested in. So again, if you've tried them, make sure you leave a comment in the description below. So I want to say thank you guys so much for tuning into another review. If you'd like to follow me, you can on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of those places at My Bourbon Journey. If you'd like to become part of the Mash and Journey Whiskey Club, make sure you check out the Patreon link in the description below. And with that being said, remember, it's about the journey and not the destination. Cheers.